One morning, they're just there. A dozen of them, maybe more, spread out across the back fence and that old gum tree at the end of the yard. You can hear them from inside the house, that distinctive, chaotic noise, branches rustling, that flash of white against the blue sky. You've heard it for months. It's just background noise now, part of the rhythm of your day. Then, one morning, it's gone. Not just quieter, gone. The fence is empty. The tree is still. The yard looks exactly the same as it always does. But something feels off in a way you can't quite put your finger on. You stand there for a second, coffee in hand, trying to figure it out. And then it hits you. The silence. It's not just quiet. It's that heavy kind of silence that only hangs around when something is missing. You probably just assume they moved on to find food. You tell yourself that's what birds do. And you go inside and don't give it another thought. But here's what you missed. They didn't just leave, they evacuated. There's a difference, and it matters way more than you'd expect. A bird leaving to find food moves loosely, in little groups, just drifting toward wherever the food is. But what cockatoos do when they vanish from a site overnight, that's something else entirely. It's coordinated in a way researchers have spent years trying to figure out, and honestly, the closer you look, the less it feels like a casual departure and more like a decision, a calculated one, made collectively. And they probably made it the night before you even noticed they were gone. Cockatoos aren't solitary thinkers. They are, for all intents and purposes, a networked species. Every flock operates with this kind of distributed intelligence. Information is constantly flowing between them through calls, posture, little movements. What one bird sees, the whole flock can access in seconds, and what the flock decides, they do it together. This isn't just a metaphor. Ecologists studying these birds in Australia have documented what they call consensus departure events. It's when an entire group clears out of a spot not because of some immediate threat, but because of a long-term assessment. Over days or maybe weeks, the birds have been running a quiet calculation. And when the results cross a line you can't even see, they just go. All of them. Overnight. The real question is, what are they actually calculating? Think about what your backyard represents to a cockatoo. It isn't just scenery. It's a node in a massive mental map they're keeping, one that spans dozens of kilometers. Food, water, how safe the trees are, how you act. It's all being registered, stored, and constantly updated. Researchers who put GPS trackers on these flocks found that they return to the same spots with almost clock-like precision, sometimes adjusting their routes by only a few hundred meters based on what they see below. They aren't wandering, they're navigating. And that site they've been visiting. Your yard, your street has a rating. A real, functional rating that the flock is maintaining together. When that rating drops, they don't announce it. They don't fly around in circles and reluctantly move on. They just don't come back. And to you, standing at the window the next morning, it just looks like they vanished into thin air. Now, here's where it gets genuinely strange, because in a lot of these cases, the thing that triggers the departure, it isn't even visible to us. Cockatoos hear in a way that we just don't. Their hearing stretches into ranges that are basically silent to us. That infrasound, those super low-frequency vibrations from storms, tectonic shifts, or even big machinery, it's all moving through the air around us, but we're completely oblivious to it. But birds, especially large-brain parrots like cockatoos, they're incredibly sensitive to it. There are studies showing flocks abandoning their roosts hours before a storm even hits, long before any local weather forecast predicted it. They weren't reacting to the rain. They were reacting to the sound the rain makes before it's even rain low. Acoustic shadow that travels ahead of the storm and announces it to anyone actually listening. You can't hear it, they can. And the second it hits a certain level, the calculation changes. But weather is just the start. What's actually more unsettling, in a quiet, creeping kind of way, is how they respond to our behavior with that same level of precision. Maybe a new dog showed up 3 weeks ago. Maybe you got a new car that idles differently. Maybe you've just changed the time you get home, or how much you're hanging out in the yard. To us, those are nothing. Tiny, boring details, but they stack up. And the flock? They're reading every single one. There are accounts from researchers about cockatoos leaving suburban spots just because renovations started at a house next door. It wasn't because the construction was too loud. It was because the pattern of human activity shifted in a way the birds felt was unpredictable. And for a species like this, unpredictability is a threat. It's not an immediate emergency, but it changes the risk profile of the whole place, and when the math on the risk changes, the decision changes with it. So, when you look out at an empty yard, what you're really seeing is the result of their accumulated intelligence. Think about the scale of that for a second. Every single bird in that flock has been watching your schedule, your sounds, your rhythms, and adding that to a shared picture. No single bird decided to leave. The decision just emerged from the collective, the way a conclusion comes from data. The flock is, effectively, running a constant, non-stop assessment of every place it uses. And as far as the flock is concerned, their assessment of your backyard has concluded. Now, flip this around. There's something that happens after they leave that most people never really think about. See, in some backyards, the birds eventually come back. Maybe it's weeks later, maybe months. But when they do return, they head straight for the same branches, the same fence posts, the same flight paths through the yard, just like they never left. It's almost like the site was just held in suspension while they were gone, kept in their collective memory. It wasn't a permanent goodbye. It was just a pause, a recalibration. The flock had moved on to a spot that was currently scoring higher, but they kept sending scouts, those birds that range ahead of the group, to check on the old place and bring back updates. Your yard wasn't forgotten. It was being watched from a distance, just waiting for the conditions to hit whatever mark the flock considers acceptable. This is the part that completely changes how you look at that silence. Because that quiet isn't just an absence, it's a gap in a relationship you probably didn't even know you were part of, but one the birds have been maintaining on their end with a whole lot of care. There are neighborhoods in Australia where people have actually figured this out. Through years of just watching, they've learned to spot the signs before the birds take off, subtle shifts in their behavior. Less foraging, more sentinels on watch. Calls that sound just a little bit different. A certain restlessness in the canopy that's easy to miss unless you're really paying attention. When you live alongside the same flock for years, that kind of knowledge just gets passed around between neighbors. They've basically learned to read the flock's mood. They know when the assessment is shifting. And that brings up a question that's been bothering researchers who study how these birds think. If they've been constantly reading us, building these complex models of how we behave and adjusting their lives based on our patterns, what would happen if we tried to do the same to them? What would you actually notice if you started paying the same level of attention to them that they've always been paying to you? So here's what's actually been going on in that quiet backyard of yours. You didn't just lose a few birds. You lost your spot in a social network you didn't even know you were part of. Think about it, that network had a name for your yard, or at least some version of one. They had a history with your fence and that tree. They'd tracked your habits and folded you right into their calculations of what's safe and what's not. And somewhere nearby, a flock of white birds is sitting in another tree, in another yard, just watching, still updating their map, still running the numbers the same way they've been doing since way before any of these cities were built. You head back inside, and the yard is just empty. The tree is still dead. But now, when you look at that silence, when you're standing at the window with your coffee, feeling that specific kind of absence, you realize it's not really empty. It's more like a pause, a long, patient, incredibly smart conversation that's been happening around you the whole time. And honestly, it might not be over. It could just be waiting for something in your world to shift. So, think back. What changed in your yard right before they vanished? It might have been something tiny, but I'd genuinely like to know. Tell me in the comments, because sometimes the pattern only shows up once we start comparing notes.